Well, we've had the weekend behind us and we've had a very volatile week as well behind us, and we'll try and dissect what's happened through that week and how markets have opened up this Monday morning. Well, focus continues to remain on the Russia-Ukraine tensions, and US indices clocked their second consecutive week lower in trade last week. Well, the Dow fell over 200 points on Friday itself, down around 0.7%. The S&P 500 also matched that, and the Nasdaq was down 1.2%. Now, all of these indices are down over 1% through last week. So clearly, the volatility in markets seems to be quite sharp. The other driver, of course, is the Federal Reserve and its policy stance on its bank rates. And the Federal Reserve minutes, the FOMC minutes, which were released last week, were quite tepid in that sense. There was less hawkishness in that stance that we did see. The Dow futures, though, are up in early trade. In fact, all US futures are up in early trade. The Dow futures are up 0.4%, the S&P 500 futures up over 0.5%, and the Nasdaq futures up nearly 0.5% in trade early this Monday morning. Moving quickly on to how Europe looked last week. Well, European markets closed lower as well. Investors continue to remain cautious as tensions within the continent continued. The FTSE was down around 1/3%. The DAX was down 1.5%. The CAC 40 down around 1/4%, and the Stock 600 was down around 0.8% in trade. Moving quickly on to how Asian markets have opened. Well, Asian markets were deep in red in early trade. In fact, the Kospi and the Nikkei were down over 1%, and the Nikkei was down over 1.5%, in fact, in early trade today. However, a lot of that has reversed, and what we see at the moment is that Asian markets are negative, but a more tempered negative. They're down over around 0.5% or so, each of them. The Nikkei is down around 0.7%. The Shanghai is down around 1/3%. The Hang Seng is down 0.6%, and the Kospi is down nearly 0.5%. The only index holding on to any semblance of gains is absolutely flat. ASX, the Australian index, is up around just 5 basis points in early trade. The SGX Nifty too seems to be following those cues, is down over 0.5% in what seems to be a negative start for Indian indices. But the volatility continues to remain quite sharp. Mind you, US closed negative. Futures currently positive. Futures were negative early in trade today as well. They've turned positive now. So a lot of volatility. It seems choppy already at the start of this week. Moving quickly on to commodities. Well, oil prices fell, of course, and that is at around $90.7 a barrel is where oil is currently standing at. Brent is around that $92.5 a barrel mark. Gold prices too have tempered, but just a wee bit. Gold is just below that $1,900 an ounce mark. The dollar index is just below the 96 mark in early trade today. The 10-year treasury yields have fallen sharply, of course, largely led by the European tensions between Ukraine and Russia. The 10-year yield currently is at 1.927%. Mind you, it had topped 2% around Thursday last week before it tempered off. Bitcoin is down below the $40,000 mark, and crypto pretty much across the board is slightly lower. It's in fact at the $39,000 mark is where the Bitcoin is at the moment. That's how we're looking at the start of trade this week, and how trade panned out last week. The volatility seems to be still in place at the start of this week.